The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get Stinko.
Welcome, Giles and the Goalie Podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell. That over there is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Ben, how was your Thanksgiving weekend?
Oh, it was good. It was good. Did the usual Thanksgiving thing at my dad's place, and then daddy daycare on Black Friday while Roz worked. And yeah, then I actually had a day off yesterday to do whatever I wanted. The wife and child were out of town for the day, and I laid around and watched football with a splitting headache. So not caused by football, but it could have been.
Yeah. Football on Saturday caused severe headaches, severe alcohol consumption. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yep.
Yeah. So that was not the greatest day. But I digress. Yeah. Thanksgiving is always a favorite of mine. You got the turkey, the stuffing, the pie.
I don't know. I feel like I didn't hit the food as hard this year. I only had one and a half heaping plates, and one slice of pie, and that was all I really had. I don't know what was wrong with me or what the particular situation was, but I could have done better.
Yeah, I was in the same. I had just a couple of plates, and then I was kind of done for the day, and I did save some room for some pie, which I had a couple of slices of, but otherwise, yeah, not your typical Thanksgiving feast on my end, where you just kind of gorge on food,
right?
Like normal, but still a good time, despite the fact that it just kept snowing all bloody weekend.
Yeah, we just didn't get pucks in deep, Giles.
Yeah, we gotta get pucks deep.
Mm-hmm.
Gotta roll 4 lines. We didn't roll 4 lines on Thanksgiving.
We didn't.
Didn't work. So
just we didn't stick to our game. You know, we tried to play their game and tried to play someone else's game. Just wasn't us.
Yep, exactly. So another funny thing I want to bring up here before we get into the topics du jour. I just came across this tweet like an hour ago, and I'm going to just yell into the microphone for a minute, but this was from Forbes, and they tweeted a link to an article that said, DC Films still doesn't know what to do with Superman. The studio reportedly is unsure how to make the character relevant to modern audiences. Well, let me tell you something, DC. Superman has never been relevant. And if that's the point where you're at, then maybe you should just retire the Superman films. None have been good. Arguments can be heard for the Christopher Reeves adaptation with Gene Hackman, but anything since then has not been good.
Right.
Just been total disaster, and Superman just lacks. Trying to think of what the word I'm looking for is. It just lacks being good. That's what Superman is so boring.
It lacks depth.
That's it. That's what I was looking for. Depth.
And I think that it's so weird to me that DC still tries to hang its hat on Superman when, Superman is he's just a candy-ass alien. Like, he's just, he's got freakish, ridiculously overpowered powers. He has no depth of personality or character whatsoever. Like, his backstory is so lame. And, his arrival on Earth did nothing for him. He was raised by a bunch of farmers. When you juxtapose that with Batman, who might be the greatest comic book character of all time, I just don't understand why DC still tries to force the Superman card. I don't get it either.
Yeah, it might be a thing where they don't want to, give us too much Batman. If that's,
and I understand that.
If that's an actual thing, but there's never too much Batman, especially in this house. But, you don't want to keep making Batman so many times where it just kind of becomes watered down. And I feel like that's the point they're at with Superman already. It's just, you can only kind of do it once, and now it's so watered down. And there was so much hype for the Man of Steel movie, and the first 15 minutes on Krypton were great, amazing, and then the remaining 2 hours and 15 minutes of the movie was just horrible trash. So it never can live up to it. So just quit making Superman movies. Just move on.
Yeah. So I think that what they need to do is, and I'll borrow from my pro wrestling background here. I think they need to book him a little bit differently, like wrestling books ridiculously overpowered guys who can't wrestle and don't have very interesting characters. Like the Ultimate Warrior back in the day was kind of that guy. I mean, Christ, even Hulk Hogan was kind of that guy. Nowadays, Roman Reigns is probably a good comparison, but have him come in, towards the end of the movie or even for a brief stint, kind of FS up, kind of knock some heads around and use his ridiculously overpowered powers, and then get him the hell out of there. He just can't hang with characters that are as good as Batman, as good as Wonder Woman. I mean, Christ, even Aquaman is more interesting than Superman is.
That says a lot.
It does. And so just get him out of there. Like, wrestling has it right. When you've got a big guy who can't really hang with actual wrestlers, who can't entertain the crowds for more than 5 minutes, you get him in and you get him out and you call it a day.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of quick exit, Kaapo Kahkonen made his much anticipated, at least by this podcast, debut this last week. After Al Stalock started in the loss Monday at the Rangers, Kahkonen made his debut Tuesday night against the New Jersey Devils. And I have to say, obviously, there's a ridiculously small sample here that we're dealing with, but I was really pleased with what Kahkonen was able to do in Goal for the Wild, as they ended up winning the game over the Devils 3-2 at New Jersey, where they still boo Zach Parise for whatever reason. But Kahkonen makes 32 saves on 34 shots, and the goals that were scored really couldn't do much on either. So an otherwise solid day from a Wild goaltender, and you don't see a lot of that. And so what were your thoughts on his NHL debut?
Yeah, like you said, small sample size, but I liked what I saw out of him. I think he put up a good effort. I don't think that he, necessarily had the opportunity to wow us. He didn't stand on his head, and in that particular game, I don't know that he needed to. But I think it was a good effort. I think for a first ever NHL start or appearance, you can't ask for much more. And I was mildly impressed by it. I think that he did what he was supposed to do.
Exactly. That I was literally teeing up the same sentence. He did what he needed to do, and he made the saves that he needed to make. And that's something, we've just talked time and time again this season, that's what the Wild just are not getting from their goaltender, is they're not getting just the routine saves that need to be made. And you saw Kahkonen make those saves on Tuesday night. And it was supposedly going to warrant a start on, Saturday?
Yeah.
Or Friday.
Friday, yeah.
Friday, sorry. Not Saturday. They didn't play Saturday.
Nope.
And all of a sudden, like the day before, the assumption was Kahkonen was going to start. Bruce Boudreau indicated that. Then you get to the rink on Friday, and Alex Stalock is the starting goaltender. So not really sure what happened there, but we didn't get to see Kahkonen again, which was kind of disappointing because I really felt that he made the routine saves and even some impressive saves, and it did warrant another start, and he just did not get that, which was, again, highly, highly disappointing. And we're going to see Devin Dubnyk probably make a return, which will probably mean the end of Kahkonen being here, so he'll probably get sent back to Iowa. But just a good performance, and hopefully at some point he can get, as we've talked about, a nice long look at the goal.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't understand not starting him on Friday. Very conceivable that he doesn't play for the Minnesota Wild the whole rest of the season, right? If Stalock and Dubnyk are healthy, there's just no reason for him to play. So you've got an opportunity to kind of see what you got. He plays one game. You win the game. He has a .941 save percentage. I don't know why you don't give him another shot. I don't know why you don't give him as an extended look, as especially when goaltending is hurting the team. And I know they played a little bit better as of late, as FS North will tell you repeatedly. They've played a little bit better as of late, but they're still struggling with goaltending. Like we saw it today, and we'll get to it. But I mean, Alex Stalock let up the baby softest goal you'll see all season today to allow Dallas to tie the game. Goaltending is still a problem. Why not give this kid any run you can? Play the hot hand.
Didn't that actually
certainly isn't Stalock or Dubnyk?
Didn't that actually give Dallas the lead?
No, I believe they tied the game. No, you're right.
Anyway, yeah, and that was just, we both basically went on Twitter and said the same thing, that is a goal that should never happen. And
right.
You see the shot chart from Kahkonen's night in New Jersey, and he made a lot of saves if you're looking at it from the faceoff circle. Clearly, the scouting report on the Wild is at this point shoot the puck from anywhere, and so you see a lot of shots from the circle coming in, which time and time again they give up goals on, and Kahkonen makes all those saves. And so it was disappointing, especially against the tire fire Ottawa Senators, that Kahkonen doesn't get to start on Friday. It kind of felt like a slam dunk start for him, just to see if he can do that again, especially against not a greater team in Ottawa. But
right.
Disappointing, and the continued usage of Al Stalock just again baffles us, and it is what it is. But I'm kind of surprised we didn't get a second look at Kahkonen after his performance against New Jersey.
Well, and give the kid a home start,
right.
We're not big on feel good stories. I'm not big on feel good stories. I try to detach as much emotion as possible from hockey, but I mean, at least give the kid a start at home on Friday just to kind of see how it goes, and to let him feel a little bit of a cheer from the crowd once in a while, and I don't know. It seems to me like they're really determined to give Alex Stalock his reps, which it's like, I saw a thing, he made his 100th NHL start, and it's just like, okay, yeah, we totally know what we're getting on Alex Stalock right now. That never changes, and it's not anything, And as you mentioned, teams have figured out the Wild. You're not going to get quality chances inside that quote-unquote home plate area. So teams are firing it from the outside, and Dubnyk and Stalock aren't holding up their end of the bargain. You don't need to be an elite goaltender to succeed with this Wild team because they allow so few quality shots. You just need to, hold up your end of the deal. And Kahkonen did that in his one start, and Dubnyk and Stalock haven't. And it's just that simple.
Right. And the thing that's really going to bother me now is the Wild are slowly creeping their way back into, relevance in the league, and they're getting closer to a playoff spot as opposed to being further away from the basement of the NHL standings.
Right.
And so I feel like that's probably played in a little bit more of
sure.
what Bruce decided to do and start Stalock. But again, it's just kind of baffling at this point, and it probably goes back to the fact Bruce is, trying to, save his job or, keep his job or whatever. And, yeah. So that's that on Kahkonen, I guess. So making the saves he needs to make is, seems such a simple concept, but yet it's been so horribly not for the Wild this year. So,
right.
And like I said, Devan Dubnyk is going to be back at some point, probably this week, I'm guessing. He returned to the team last week after it was revealed that his wife has some serious health issues that put her in the hospital, so he was kind of given like a leave of absence from the team just to kind of take care of that. So that was the reason he was not with the Wild for the last week and change. So
yeah, a word from our sponsor. Are you tired of freelancers and agencies that care more about their conference and public speaking schedule than about the work you're paying them to do? Not quite ready for a multi-million-dollar virtual reality ad campaign? Want to work with someone who you can discuss the finer points of Paul Fenn's ineptitude with? Give friend of the podcast Brian Reynolds a chance. His new agency, NS, that's Nancy Sam, Marketing, will help you find the right channel, the right message, and the right time to talk to your audience. Specializing in social media, organic and paid, SEO, and email marketing, NS Marketing can help sort out your digital marketing strategy. With over 12 years of experience helping everyone from individuals and small businesses to nonprofits and Fortune 500 companies, Brian knows what can be done and what absolutely should not be done. So if you're looking for one of us to help you with your digital marketing, go with NS Marketing. Reach out to Brian at Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, at nsmarketing.net. Tell him your opinion on soup as a meal to get a free consultation. NS Marketing, better than a broken clock.
But yeah, and on a lighter note, speaking of Sunday's game, Mikko Koivu played his 1,000th career game in the NHL, all of course with the Wild. And we come back to our time-honored discussion of what does the future hold for
Koivu in the Wild? Is this his last season in the NHL period? And then ultimately, does his number get retired? Which, again, is another hot topic amongst the Wild interneters.
Yeah.
I think, if I remember right, we've kind of hit on this, but we both are of the belief that his number should be retired, correct? Or are you against?
No, I am. I think, I probably am a little bit more towards the borderline than you are on it. But I think ultimately what retiring a number means is that it'd be weird if someone else wore that number. You know what I mean? Like all of the goddamn Vikings wearing 84.
Right.
Like it's weird and it's kind of insulting. And thankfully the Timberwolves have been smart enough to not do the same thing with 21. But I think if you see another Wild player wearing number 9 anytime in the next decade, it's going to be really weird, right? So, yeah, I think you retire it. I mean, based on that kind of guiding principle alone, I think retiring it is good enough. Is he a good enough player to have his number retired? That's certainly the debatable part, and but I also don't think you need to be a Hall of Fame player to have your number retired. I mean, we've seen it with a lot of things. I mean, the Twins have several non-Hall of Famers that have their numbers retired just because of the contributions they made to the team. Well, being around from year 2 all the way until now and being the team captain for a very, very significant part of his career, I mean, almost entirety of his career, is probably worthwhile enough to retire his number.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think, he doesn't have to be a Hall of Fame player, as you said, to have his number retired. Ken Herbeck with the Twins is the first one that kind of comes to mind where, not by any means a Hall of Fame player, but it would be incredibly weird to see anyone else wear that number.
Right.
And so I do think that, there will be a day when we see number 9 up in the barren rafters of XL Energy Center.
How about this? How about for those naysayers that don't want his number in the rafters, how about we replace the 1 banner with the 9 banner? Is that? I mean, I obviously you and I are 100% for that, but would that be a fair swap?
Yes.
Do you think more people would be accepting of 9 being in the rafters if that meant that 1 was no longer in the rafters?
I mean, it is to me. But I know there's probably those out there who love to feel good about themselves by looking at the old number 1 sitting in the.
God, I hope not.
The rafter.
Like I can argue with Koivu haters, and you know what? They have a lot of valid points because maybe his career isn't all that it's been cracked up to be by local media and whatever, and maybe he gets overrated because of his leadership role with the team. But I mean, you cannot defend the number 1 banner. Like that's just it's so indefensible. It's a little bit surprise. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not surprised that the Wild haven't quietly taken it down, because if they do take it down, it will be very quietly. But I'm a little bit surprised that it's still there because it's so silly.
Well, I feel like at this point they're just going to hope people don't notice it anymore instead of just taking it down. But
yeah,
I
don't know.
Again, just another one of those things that nothing's going to move. So
I want to see them sign a goalie that loves wearing number 1. Roberto Luongo.
Yeah, he was the one that came to mind.
Not a whole lot of 1s left, unfortunately. I think it's a solid goalie number, but not a lot left. I want to see that. I want to see that a free agent goalie come in and the team be like, you know what? We love you so much. We're going to unretire that number.
Right.
And 2 birds with 1 stone.
Yeah, that would be great if they could do that, but not getting my hopes up.
Nope.
The other thing I wanted to bring up is Zach Parise is absolutely lighting the world on fire right now. He's had back-to-back games of 2 points with a goal and assist each.
Then you look at his last 9 games, he has tallied 8 goals and 2 assists, which is just absolutely incredible considering he is, 35 years old now at this point? And he...
No, I think he's only 34.
34? Okay.
Maybe he is 35.
34,
it's around
35. Anyway, he now leads the team in goals for the year. I believe today was his 12th goal of the season. To easily lead the Wild in goals, the next closest is Jason Zucker with 9. But just another, stretch where Parise has just defied the age and just continued to do the things he does very well. And you look at the game today, his goal came from right out in front of the net, swatting a puck out of midair. Very
that was a beauty, too.
Typical Parise stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so the question I have is, if he continues to play well and say, the team just kind of toils around at, under the playoff line and they end up missing it, do you try and maybe see if you can move him again in the offseason? Because it's been out there that there was a team that made an offer for Parise in the offseason with Paul Fenton, but the trade...
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
We don't know who the team is, but Fenton was clearly trying to maybe see if he could get somebody to take him, and Lord knows what the return would have been for that. But
if it's not negative, then you almost have to do it just to get out from under that contract. But then you still got recapture issues.
Right. You still have to worry about the recapture penalty. But is that something you maybe would want the Bill Garrett and the front office to look at again, or do you just ride it out? Because it was painfully obvious also in the offseason that Parise was not at all happy with where the team was going. So he definitely wants to, try and win before, his time in the league is up.
Yeah, and so I think by that virtue, I think I am interested because clearly Parise would be okay with it, right? Like, clearly he wants to be on a winning team and he wants to get another cup before he retires. And in order for the deal to happen, he has to okay it. So I don't think there's any question there. I mean, if he's willing to waive the no movement clause, then that means that he's interested. And then that means that that's what's best for him and that's what he wants. And what's best for the team is certainly, getting out from under that contract, especially kind of in the place they are right now. And is it great that he's the best player on the team right now and scoring and all that jazz? Of course. But you've got, 6 years left on those deals? Or 5 after this year? There's just no way that ends well. There's just no way. And so I think without a doubt, you at least have to pick up the phone and you at least have to entertain the idea and you at least have to approach Parise with it, knowing that he's semi-interested in it already, and you have to do what's best for the team. Now, how much they have to attach to him in order for a team to take him, I think is probably the biggest thing. We've seen salary dumps before in the NHL where, teams kind of get the short end of the stick, and then even though they're trading a good player, the contract is so bad that they have to attach a pretty significant pick or prospect. So that would be my concern, but I think that you at least have to try, because as an NHL GM, you don't do much, right? Like, you make a couple of trades a year, you do one draft, and you make a couple of signings. So that's your job, is to entertain those offers and to see if you can find something that works. That's your job. So yeah, absolutely.
And I think the other argument for is you get someone who has, interest, and if you can actually work out some kind of a deal and make this happen, then you're kind of lessening the cap recapture penalty
if he were to retire early on yourself. The Wild would still, be on the hook for the recapture penalty, but like we saw with Luongo and the Panthers in Vancouver, each team had a recapture penalty. One was, more than the other because the team that signed the contract, Vancouver, still got dinged heavily for it, but Florida also was on the hook for a little bit of it. So it would certainly help the Wild down the road if, they don't have as much on the recapture as they normally would, but I'm very pessimistic that they can get something done, even though the player would clearly welcome a move to a winner. It would be a lot to move that cap hit, and you would have to take something on, and I'm not sure, if you really want that. Again, you can always just put him on LTIR with some mysterious injury and just run out the clock. He doesn't actually have to file the retirement paperwork.
Zach, is that a rash? Your arm looks kind of red.
Chris Pronger went into the goddamn Hall of Fame while he was still actively under contract by an NHL team.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, now with the CBA being extended, who knows? I mean, it's kind of puts you in a weird space where there's no amnesty buyouts coming, as far as you know. There's no rule changes coming, as far as you know, which might be good in some regards, but that recaptures penalty is still there. And that makes it for a very interesting situation with kind of moving those preseason Cedar contracts, because we always kind of assumed that something would work itself out for the positive because the CBA would change, and owners are great at keeping themselves from getting burned on bad contracts, especially with these CBAs. So that now it's kind of it's more uncertain than it was before. It feels like.
Yeah. All right. Moving along, we can dig into the old memory banks, and we're going to continue on our discussion. Well, not discussion, but we're going to move forward, as I said, with the segment we did last week, where we looked back at the Eric Belanger trade tree as we reflect on the last decade of Wild hockey. Ben, what trade tree did you come up with for this week?
So I don't have it's not, I guess, specifically a trade tree, because I looked, and you did too. There isn't much left on this team that has any kind of trade tree whatsoever. But I did find a trade that I thought was very interesting. And it involves Jason Zucker. And so he was drafted in the second round in the 2010 draft at the start of this glorious decade. But what people don't remember is that the Wild traded for that pick. And they traded with the Panthers. They gave up their third-round pick and their fourth-round pick in that season. And their third-round pick ended up being pick 69.
Nice.
And it ended up being a fellow named Joe Bassaraba, who just happened to be drafted from Shattuck St. Mary's, which is interesting, even though he obviously never really made much of a career in the NHL. The fourth-round pick by the Panthers, Jonas Donskoy.
Oh, yeah.
And he obviously ended up getting traded to the Sharks, and now he's signed with the Avs. But, pretty solid, I feel like kind of a little bit on the underrated side player. But I thought that was interesting. I thought that it was interesting that essentially the Wild traded, some no-name guy from Shattuck and Jonas Donskoy for Jason Zucker.
That's not terrible.
I think the Wild will take that all day.
Right.
And they should.
The one that I had looked up, it wasn't necessarily a trade tree, but the one that I found
fascinating was that the Wild in 2011, June 2011, they traded a third-round pick to Philadelphia for Darryl Powell, whom we all remember just played 90 games in 2 years with the Wild. And then before he was eventually traded because he wasn't getting played, so he requested a trade. He got traded to the Rangers. Now, this third-round pick that went to Philadelphia is actually changed hands quite a bit. So I would like to read and this was for the 2013 draft. So it was, for a pick a couple years down the road, but is again classic Chuck Fletcher, just trading high premium draft choices years down the line. But yeah, I'm going to read where this draft pick went before it finally ended up in its final place in its draft pick. So it went to Philadelphia. Then in February of 2012, Philadelphia sent that pick to Dallas in the Nicholas Grossman trade. And then the pick ended up going to Pittsburgh in a trade in March 2013 that sent Joe Morrow to Dallas in exchange for Brendan Morrow. And there were obviously other picks involved in these deals as well. But so we had Minnesota, Philadelphia, Dallas, Pittsburgh. And with that pick in the 2013 third round, this was 77th overall, the Pittsburgh Penguins took Jake Gensel.
Because why not?
Yeah. Jake Gensel, as we all know, was a forward for the Hill Murray Pioneers and now has put up great numbers with the Penguins, playing alongside Sidney Crosby, was a 40-goal scorer last season. So go figure, the Wild traded away a pick that ended up being a 40-goal scorer.
Right.
So that was the one that I had seen, just Darryl Powell. You're giving away a third-round pick for a fourth-round grinder. That is the definition of the Wild in the 2010s in terms of trades. Trading away premium draft picks for just grinders.
Right. Yeah.
Just blows my mind.
That's pretty brutal.
So that was the one I came up with in our little stroll down memory lane. So Darryl Powell,
could have been Jake Gensel.
Jake Gensel? Nope. We've got Darryl Powell. Yeah, that 2011-12 roster is just an eyesore.
Yeah, those were dark times.
Yeah. So yeah, there is your Decade in Review segment for the week. And then finally, we're going to dig into the mailbag for a few minutes here to close out the show. Couple of questions in to the Giles and the Goalie podcast mailbag. First question on our Twitter is from Alec. He asked, do we buy or sell at the deadline?
Oof. We've talked about this. There's not really much to sell. And there's not much by the way of folks that make a lot of sense for this team to sell. Again, we talked about the whole Parise thing. If you can make that work, wonderful. But they have one expiring contract, Mikko Koivu. I don't think you're dealing him as a rental, even though that is a very interesting proposition as well. Other than that, it seems like Eric Stahl kind of took a haircut on his contract to stay here. So he really does want to be here despite the situation here. And anyone else, it's kind of like, I don't know. I mean, do you trade a guy like Jonas Brodin? Is that something you can even get a whole lot for at this point? I don't know. To answer the question, I think they try to sell, but I fear not a whole lot will get done.
I've said this before on the show. I think you won't see any trades on the roster until the deadline at minimum from Bill Guerin, as he kind of gets settled into his position. And ultimately, it really does depend on what the Wild are doing at that time. If they're playing well and they're maybe going to have a run at a playoff spot, then he probably will just stand pat. I certainly don't think he's going to buy by any means. But it's either going to be a stand pat or, sell anything he can get. So I don't even, like you said, I don't even think they do anything. I think they just kind of sit on this roster for the year and see what happens. And then you make your moves in the offseason to have Guerin start putting a stamp on the roster.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Next question from PJ asks, how bad do you think Kaprizov's first year will go, and what are the chances he Kovalchuks? That's this is an interesting question because I often wonder, what expectations are for Kirill Kaprizov and how he will perform against those expectations. And I think there will be a little bit of growing pains for him next year, just adapting to the NHL. But, I think if you're trying to set a bar, obviously he's going to be slotted in at, top 6 minutes. So I would maybe say set the bar at 40, 50 points. And go from there, and if you're expecting anything more, that's really setting a high bar, and you are setting him up, to be a failure in your eyes, at least in that first season. Chances he Kovalchuks, man, I have no idea. It's so hard to predict, what the Russian players will do, because if there comes a day when they just get, not satisfied with their playing time, then, they always have the option to go back home and make boatloads of cash by playing in the KHL. So I don't know. You never know. That's the risk you take by having a player like this. But, it ultimately depends on the player.
Yeah, I think that situation is maybe a little more rare than we think. I mean, of all the guys who have left Russia, especially at a relatively young age, Kovalchuk didn't go back until, God, he was in his 30s, right? Like Yeah,
he was like 32, 33.
Yeah, it took a while for him to go back. I think the Shipachyov situation with Vegas was...
That was weird. That was
a really weird situation, and that is something that's a little bit scary and something where, Shipachyov himself said, if I was leaving the KHL, I would think 10 times about it before I go to the NHL. And that's terrifying to hear as, somebody who wants to see Kaprizov leave the KHL. But I think other than those two situations where, like you said, Russians going back to Russia in their 30s, not really earth-shattering, Shipachyov being a really weird kind of one-off, maybe the exception that proves the rule. I think otherwise, I think you're fine. I think he comes here and he sticks around. I don't think he plays a season here and goes, whoa, what did I get myself into? I'm out. I don't see that happening with him. I think he's far too talented, and he knows the kind of money he can make in the NHL. Not to mention just the fact that you're playing in the NHL. I mean, this is a dream for kids around the world to play in the NHL. It's not just a dream for North American kids. So I think that there's plenty there for him to stick around.
It's also worth noting that right now, as we record on Sunday night, Bill Guerin is over in Russia watching Kaprizov, and at the end of the trip, he will get a sit down with them, have some dinner and whatnot. So that obviously will be maybe a big talking point next week if there's any kind of news or stories that come out of that. So just kind of something to keep an eye on as we move into the new week here. So the last question we have from the mailbag is, with Fiala being so hot. Sorry, this is from Morpheus from the Matrix. Wow, I'm honored.
Sure. Crazy.
With Fiala being so hot, will the Wild still trade him? Who gets the C next year? Who will get the chop when Patterson returns? Do we actually need him to return? There's a lot of questions here. First question, with Fiala being so hot, will the Wild still trade him? I think you do try to, maybe move him while, value is high. He has really good stretches, but then he has really bad stretches. He is still 23, but I'm not sure, you're going to get much more out of him than, maybe like a 50-point ceiling.
Yeah.
I start to wonder if that's really the ceiling he has. So if somebody makes you a decent offer for him while he's on fire, I say by all means, pull that trigger and just get whatever you can for him. Sell high essentially. So that's where I'm at with Fiala right now, even though I do like how he is playing. Who gets the C next year? Man, I guess we'll take this one by one. Do you want to answer the Fiala one first?
Sure. It's really a shame Paul Fenton doesn't work for an NHL team anymore, because that would be blowing their phone up. I think that maybe you'd try to. Again, we're going to find out what Guerin's front office thinks of Kevin Fiala, because it's obviously not as high as what Fenton thought of him. But we're going to find out if he thinks that Fiala is a guy worth keeping around versus a guy, because if he's a 50-point guy, maybe that's a guy worth keeping around. And maybe, maybe if Guerin wants to keep that. So we're going to really find out. I mean, we obviously know Fenton kind of ridiculously overvalued Fiala. We're going to find out what Guerin thinks of him and what other teams in the NHL think of him, because, if no deal gets done with him, then it's pretty obvious that the rest of the league doesn't value him that much, or Guerin is perfectly okay with keeping Fiala.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't see it happening. I just don't see a trade being made, just because I think that to make it worth it to trade Fiala, it's like, well, why? He's young enough, and if he's going to be a 50-point guy, I mean, why not hold on to him? I don't know how much return you're going to get for him, and I think that's really the biggest question.
Yeah. So the second question was, who gets the C next year? Which, man, I haven't really thought about this a whole lot. It's just so weird to think of somebody else besides Koivu being the captain of the team. But if Koivu's not back next year, which probably won't be, then yeah, you're going to need a new captain. Or do they go the route like some other teams do, and they just have like 4 alternates and don't have a permanent captain? I would say probably Parise. That would be my vote.
Yeah, it almost has to be Parise or Suter, right? Because they're the A's right now. I think it'd be Parise, and I think that's not something that's like wild and crazy,
Right.
And if Parise's not on the team, as we talked about, unlikely, but whatever, then it's Suter. And if magically Parise, Suter, and Koivu aren't on the team next season, it's probably Stahl. Maybe you've got an outside shot at a guy like Spurgeon, or even Jason Zucker. But I think, again, this is like, determining who's going to be the president, but by determining who dies, like you're just not going to get that far down the list.
Right. Then the next one was who gets the chop when Patterson returns, or do we actually need him to return? And it's probably going to be Soucy, despite the fact he's playing really well on the third pair. And actually, I kind of view Soucy as like Greg Patterson, a much younger, cheaper version of Greg Patterson.
Left-handed, though.
Yeah. So I would hope that the Wild can maybe unload Patterson to somebody, but when he's making almost $3 million on the cap for this year and next year, that's really a lot for a third pair defenseman. Man, who signed that contract?
Yeah, I think that in all likelihood we'll probably see. I would like to think we see a pretty fair rotation between Soucy and Hunt. They're completely different players as far as what they bring to the team. And, you'd love to have both of them. I mean, you'd love to have Hunt if for nothing else than on the power play. But, Soucy is that kind of strong and steady guy in the third pair. So I think you see a pretty good rotation between them. And I think you see, I think you see it split fairly evenly, and they just kind of ride the hot hand. And maybe that means Soucy takes a few nights off, as you're mentioning, that maybe they want Hunt there for the power play, since he does bring that something extra that Soucy doesn't. But I think that it ends up being a fairly even timeshare.
Yeah. That is the mailbag for this week. Thank you to everyone who submitted questions. And that can probably call it a show for this week.
Sure.
So, you can follow Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. Podcast Twitters at GATG Wild Podcast. Listen to the show on SoundCloud, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube. And if you do listen on iTunes, please leave us a rating. Helps us out a lot. Zonecoverage.com is where the podcast is also found. That is where we also write. Zonecoverage.com/wild. I also do a bit of work on the Gopher Hockey. Zonecoverage.com/Gophers. Check that out as well. Thank you for listening to us this week, and we will talk to you again next week.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.